I want to kind of walk you through your journey like somewhat chronologically. I know like there's a lot of founders who come in like very privileged, like they maybe have a lot of family backing or like maybe they have a lot of connections initially. From my understanding, that's not where you were from, right? So tell me, how did you get started and like what was the early days at Duffl like hustling looking like?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I was born in China. I grew up in Peru. And so when I came to college, I was an international student. I couldn't really get a job. You have to have a social security number. So I went through a lot of loops to try to get credit and like a social security number. And I was working as a concessions guy at Poly Pavilion. And so my job was to grill the hot dogs. And it was honestly my first job ever. And it was like super brain numbing. Like I was just like, this is the worst. I was like trying to listen to audiobooks while working. They wouldn't really let me. And so I quit. I went home and I built a website on Weebly because I didn't know how to code. And I didn't have any money, so I borrowed money from my roommates. So we borrowed, like we got together like $400 and we printed a bunch of flyers and we bought a bunch of t-shirts. It was called Powered at the time. And yeah, I remember just going to the hill with my roommates, just like handing out flyers, like try this delivery service. It's literally a Weebly website linked to a Google form that would just ping my phone. So whenever I was in class, somebody would just order anything. It'd be like, bring Gucci to Poly Pavilion or to the library. Yeah, that's how we got started. And then did like hundreds of those deliveries. Those were some dark days. Like I remember like coming down Strathmore at like 2 a.m. and I'm listening to like Guy Raz, how I built this. And I'm literally listening to Tony Shu's story with DoorDash. And I go over this giant puddle of like muddy water and just splashes all over my face. I have like 2 bags of Starbucks in my hands. I look to my right and there's like a bunch of people partying, like leaving Signu and having a great time. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And that's when I heard like, you know, Tony was like driving his Honda Civic delivering hummus when everyone was partying in Cabo after like MBA, and it was just stuff like that kept me going. And I remember getting rejected from SEP and like Bruin Ventures and BVI, every single club in UCLA, like every single one. And then all the frats. And then it was just like so many L's that I was like, I have to go all in on my thing. So if I don't believe in myself, nobody will believe in me. And yeah, that's why I went all in. And then we got into Startup UCLA. Well, actually before that, we got into Startup Labs. That was the first accelerator that believed in us, so shout out to them. And then we got into Startup UCLA and they gave us $5,000. I was like, life-changing. We used that money to buy like a laptop for my co-founder, Brian. He had a really shitty computer that would, like, the screen would go blue every time he would open it. So he had to stick an eraser between like the keyboard and the screen. So we spent the $5,000 to buy him like a computer, and that was the best investment we ever made. And yeah, and he built the entire stack. We started doing all the deliveries ourselves, and that's how Duffl was born.
That's awesome. Like, okay, so what, I guess like when you got into, how did you handle so much like rejection? Obviously you got rejected from all the clubs, which, you know, at the time was probably like a big thing for you. Now, like, you know, you can laugh at it and like, but like I understand I think for a lot of people in this room, it's like, it does feel like a big thing. And then like, what kept you motivated? What was like the early days? So you said it was dark. What kept you motivated during those early days?
Yeah. No, I remember being extremely upset about not getting into those clubs. And it means a lot, right, when you're in college and like, they're super selective. And it's already like UCLA students, and then it's like even more selective. And you feel bad because you feel like you're not good enough. And then I think the one that hurt the most was SEP, because it's like, you're an entrepreneurship frat, man. Like, what? I really thought I belonged there, but I guess not. I think what kept me going was honestly like books and podcasts. Like like how I built this, like listening to all the stories of other founders have gone through worse. Like I've been a big fan of Elon since I was like 12 years old. Like when I was 16, I became like super fan because he had a YouTube video called The Real Life Iron Man. And like his story's even crazier. You know, he was also an immigrant. Nobody knows this, but like he worked a job as like this carpentry shoveler in this tunnel, and he had to wear a hazmat suit in Canada, like just like shoveling stuff out of a furnace. So it's like stories like that, of people like that keep me going.
So I know you have like a interesting story for like how you met your co-founder. I think co-founders are super, super important. How did you meet your co-founders, and what was like early journey look like at UCLA?
Yeah, I would say like finding the right co-founder is the most important decision you'll make about the future of your company, because people come up with ideas, not the other way around. So your co-founders are the brains that you're working with. The quality of those neural nets determines the quality of ideas that you're going to have and the quality of decisions you're going to make, which ultimately decides the quality of the company. So surrounding yourself with the most high quality neural nets is the most vital thing. And I think people overvalue sometimes just sheer intelligence, but like character is the most difficult thing to vet for, and it's the most valuable thing when shit hits the fan. And I think I initially just didn't really have a great judge of character, partially because of like the way I was brought up. I wasn't exposed to American culture for one, but just the different types of personalities. And yeah, like my first co-founder didn't really want to do the work. Like he just wanted to be like an advisor. I was like, you own 50% of the company. What do you mean you're not going to do deliveries? Like, I ended up doing thousands of deliveries by myself, right? I was like, okay, that's not going to work. Other co-founders were super smart, like helped me build the company, but ultimately we disagreed on the vision of the company. I wanted to build more of a retail focus. They wanted to do like a more software route, which ironically might have been the right route, but at the time we had no experience. So I was like, okay, we have to first learn how to do this ourselves before we go software or franchise. And that's when we split up, and I was also during the pandemic after Y Combinator. And yeah, and then I think my technical co-founder just got super burnt out and ultimately just couldn't endure the pain anymore, which I think is the advantage of someone like with my upbringing, is that I have an extremely high pain tolerance, which can also be a bad thing because you put up with more than you probably should. When it's like unreasonable, like most people would really like stop, you would keep going, which is I think why Duffl is still here, but I think there's a limit to that. But if you don't have the right co-founders around you, it's like you're a one-legged stool. You know, you're just gonna fall over. When you're feeling bad, the company performs bad. If you're feeling great, the company performs great. When you have co-founders, you can kind of like oscillate with each other, where people can cover you when you're feeling bad and vice versa. And obviously, like, there are skill sets that other people are it's very natural for them to be, I don't know, emotionally intelligent or be really good at finance or be really good at XYZ that you just might naturally not be. That's why it's so critical to have like strong partnerships.
That's like some really good insight. So, you know, you go into Startup UCLA, you have $5,000. Like, because during the accelerator, you have some traction, students are figuring you out. What did it look like going from there to like getting like your first check? How did you go for like, because that's a lot of like, I think there's a lot of people, or not a lot, but like there's a considerable number of founders who go through Startup UCLA. How did you get from there to like getting your first check, or like, you know, what I guess maybe made you attractive to people who funded you and gave you the shot for real funding initially?
Yeah, I think the moment was getting into YC. Mm-hmm. I actually didn't think we could get into YC, but we shot our shot and like they gave us an interview. I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. And in retrospect, I know why we got the interview. It's because we had watched all of the startup school and YC YouTube videos. So we were like brainwashing ourselves with YC knowledge, and so we knew how to do the application very well. Like they don't like verbosity, they don't like jargon. They just want very simple language and actual traction. So we had 30,000 a month of sales. and we use very simple language, like we deliver snacks in 10 minutes. And that's why they gave us an interview. However, we actually completely whiffed the interview. And at the end, they were like, because we were just like super nervous. And at the end, they were like, I think we're going to re-interview you. So they gave us 5 hours, and they said our interview would be after 5 hours, which happens when they're like not sure to reject you, but like they didn't let you in. So it's like kind of your last chance. And we were like panicking. We went to the park. All 5 of us were gathered together, and we started drilling everything. And we just rehearsed in the park on every single metric, every single question for 5 hours. And then we went back, and we just nailed it, like ping pong. We kept hitting the ball back, and it was Michael Seibel and those guys, and they were like, yeah. And then we got a call. We were on Stanford's campus, and it was like a unreal moment, you know? We were all like 20 years old.
Yeah. So you were doing 30,000 a month at that point. Like, I want to back up a bit, like, because that going from 0 to 30,000 obviously requires a serious hustle. Like, obviously you can't do 30,000 by yourself delivering scooters. So like, what was the connect between you delivering scooters and then making 30,000 a month? Because then like how did that happen? Like, how did you recruit people? How do you build a business model like recruiting? Like, that's like operationally so intensive. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, honestly, I think 0 to 30,000 was way harder than 30,000 to 300,000. I have to give a lot of credit to my co-founders at the time. I think they helped me a lot. I was naturally very good at systems building. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like the most organized guy ever, and I could create, you know, like the systems, the SOPs, the financial tracking and whatnot, but we just needed manpower. And so we tried everything. Like, we were like putting Facebook group posts. That's actually how we found our technical co-founder. We were looking for scooters, and he was selling hacked bird scooters. And we were like, oh, we also have bird scooters. Like, what's going on there? Like, that's how we met. And yeah, I think it's just like you start to evangelize. You have to become the ultimate evangelist of your company. Like, that's why it's so painful for founders, because you and the company become one. Like, you have to put your name on the line. You have to put your face on the line. Like, you are the company. You only talk about the company. Everybody you know has heard about the company, and that's how you recruit. Like, that's how you get your first customers. It's just that your whole life just becomes the company. It's really like having a kid. It's like you press a button and your life's never the same again.
That's crazy. So like, obviously you had people who covered your differences in the beginning, and then you like, obviously I think the thing is like, do things that don't scale. I think you say that a lot. YC says that a lot. Did a lot of that. Get to 30,000, your YC, and then this is like where COVID happens, right? So then like, what happens there?
Yeah.
And you're in the accelerator, and like, what happens?
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing up don't do things that don't scale.
Yeah.
I'll give some examples of that. So, I guess the Weebly website is definitely not scalable. Another example is we didn't really have money to pay payment processors, or to like create a like business bank account and do all that stuff. So instead, we took money through Venmo. We had a deep link on the website where you click and it would just auto-populate like at Duffl's Venmo. And obviously, you have to reconcile that. So then I wrote a Python script. I learned Python to write the script to reconcile the emails and the actual orders. That was something that we did that didn't scale. And then we actually tried to scale it. So we built a server-hosted version of that, and we actually ended up processing like millions of dollars through just a Venmo thing that we called it Hacky Venmo. Literally, just do whatever it takes. And then we weren't aware of supply chain companies like McLean, KeHE, Core-Mark. So we were driving to Costco and Walmart every weekend. So we did this for a year. Like, every weekend we drive there. And it got so tiring, like literally going through the aisles and like picking out the snacks. We were like, okay, there's gotta be a better way. So I built a Selenium bot that would scrape the Walmart website. Literally like the bot that people use to like buy sneakers really quick. We used that to like buy snacks on Walmart and like order for pickup. We'd drive there, they'd haul my entire car filled with snacks, and then that was our supply chain. It was just things like that. We just had to hack our way around obstacles.
Yeah, so that's probably like the right decision early on because like, you incur too much risk, like trying to build out something crazy and then, you're not validated and all that stuff there. But yeah, going back to the question though, COVID happens. What happened there and like how did you go through that position?
So we get the first case of coronavirus in Santa Clara, and I remember seeing the map. It was like one dot in the entire continent of the United States, one red dot. It was exactly where we were. And we were like, oh, not good. So they canceled the batch. We didn't get a demo day, first batch in history. It was online. And we just had a slide online. That was the demo day. And we all moved back to LA. We were living out of a house that we were also running the store out of. And that was a really challenging time. We were also having a lot of co-founder fights. It was just very tough to be in that situation. We didn't have any investors. Everybody left college. So no customers, no employees, no investors, no money. And that's, I think, the second or third time that Duffl should have died. But I think I just looked at my co-founder in the eyes and I was like, we're gonna make this happen. And we did. I think that just like pure stubbornness is what got us through Corona. And so from April of 2020 to October of 2020, we grew from 0 to 3 million. It's like the fastest growth we've ever had, just because we didn't give up in that moment. And I think that was very worth it, saying we're not gonna give up here, because the next chapter was so beautiful. And that wouldn't have happened if I just said, like, I quit.
Walk me through like 0 to 3 million. That's pretty crazy for any startup, especially for what you're doing. That's ridiculous. Like, so I guess like before you kind of YC, did you feel like you found product market fit? So was this like kind of making it happen after people returned after COVID, or like what repeatable thing did you identify as like, oh, we can make this happen? Like what? Because obviously that confidence has to be rooted in some sense of logic, right? So like, what was that like key factor that allowed you to grow like super fast? Yeah.
See, that's the thing about Duffl. I think we've always had a strong product market fit, in a sense, and I say that because, I started with a Wibbly website delivering anything, and it was through slow iteration that we got to this model of we own the inventory, and we deliver directly in 10 minutes on scooters, right? So that I think has strong product market fit, clearly validated by like the tens of billions of dollars that went through this in the preceding years. But the problem was that my co-founder at the time, who was actually CEO at the time, he wanted to pivot a lot. So we were constantly pivoting through YC. So we never gave it the time to really mature. And that's why we had the co-founder dispute, because I was just like, man, we just gotta focus. So once we said focus, and once it was just me and one of my co-founders, Brian, once it was just the two of us, it was like complete alignment. All the noise was gone. And like you have to kind of like brain meld with each other. You become the same consciousness. You wake up, you're working, you sleep. You wake up, working, sleep. You're constantly talking to each other. I was delivering when he was coding. I was coding when he was delivering. Like that kind of efficiency will actually, it's impossible to get back to that level of productivity. Like no matter how big your company gets, like at one point we were like 50 people at HQ with like 3,000 people company-wide. You never get back to the efficiency of just 2 people when you're fully aligned. And I think that's beautiful. Like when you actually can get so much done with just 2 brains. But yeah, the enemy of a startup is other people's lives, right? So like if you have people who are like trying to have work-life balance or trying to have hobbies or other, like they might be in school, right? Mm. These are all distractions that really destroy a startup's chances. Like once you start a company, you're not a student anymore. Even if you're enrolled, you're now a parent, and you have to feed the kid. And I think that's what most people don't realize. It's like, once you give birth, you have to raise the child.
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable going into some of the co-founder disagreements, or is that something that's like too touchy to talk about? Yeah, I think that's something that probably resonates with a lot of people here.
Yeah, I think high level, So my co-founder Rohan was the CEO, and he is extremely gifted, like the most persuasive, charming guy ever, super smart. He ended up building one of the biggest NFT projects on Solana. And so it definitely wasn't about like competence or like intelligence or anything like that. It was more about just alignment. Too many chefs on the table. Like I think what he wanted to do would have worked. I think what I wanted to do worked. But just the fact that you disagree is just, it's like, you know, your parents are fighting. Like it's just not gonna work out. Mm-hmm. And so like finding someone you can align with, somebody you can disagree and commit to, somebody you trust so deeply on that level of like even if he's wrong or she's wrong, I'm willing to commit to their vision. Mm-hmm. That's really rare. And I think like finding someone like that, someone who's like James Bond is like a great analogy. Like you just unflappable, right? Unstoppable. Super intelligence will do anything given the situation to make it work. That's who you're looking for. And it's like most people by the age of 22 have met such a small fraction of their total network that they will end up meeting in their lives. That is very unlikely that you're picking the co-founder that you're gonna have for your, you know, the startup that really succeeds, right? Like there's something called the 37% rule in mathematics, which is called the optimal stopping problem. Like when, let's say you're looking for a house and you have all these options, when do you stop looking? Right? Let's say you're hiring a secretary and you have all these applications. When do you stop looking for the better person? And mathematically, the answer is 37%. So you should spend the first 37% of your time collecting data on all the available options. So let's say you have 100 applications, you read the first 37, and then you take the next best one that is better than all the previous. That's actually like the algorithm for optimal stopping. And if the average life expectancy is 77 years old, then you won't have crossed the 37% mark until age 29. So likely your ideal career, partner, co-founder, startup is after the age 29. So yeah, I think like, yeah, I could go on forever about co-founders.
Yeah, you obviously
I actually made a YouTube video about it.
Go check it out. Yeah, that's like, so I guess like in some ways you've got unlucky for your first time. So I guess like boil it down, too many chefs in the kitchen initially, right? Make sure your alignment on values initially, and then from there, like I think one thing that I tell people is like work with them a little bit before we work with them a lot. I don't know if you agree with that as well.
Yeah, it's like getting married.
Yeah. You gotta date them.
Definitely want to date them. And yeah, I think like most people don't look beyond intelligence and knowledge, you know? Like work is about so much more than just knowing how to do things and skills. Smart people can learn anything, but an attitude change requires a brain transplant. Yeah, that's an Elon quote. You know, like you can't change somebody's attitude. You cannot change their character. Their character is like the way their neural net has been trained since they were a baby for like 20 years. You're not gonna change that in a year that you know them. Like that's already like what they are. People can change, don't get me wrong, but that takes so long that you really want to pick someone that you know at a deep level. Sometimes it's like your best friend from childhood. Sometimes it's like somebody you went to high school with. It just takes a lot of time to get to know someone. And you have to go through moments where you're vulnerable. You know, like they could stab you in the back, but that's when you really see, will they? Unless you've gone through those moments, you just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're 22, now you're sitting on whatever, a couple million. You have to grow up really fast, right? How did you navigate like becoming like a company? You know, hiring real employees, expanding, like how did you navigate that? Or what would you have done differently if you feel like you did a shit job? If you
I think I did a shit job. Honestly, like, I am so impressed about like, you know, I think people think of college entrepreneurs and they think like Mark Zuckerberg. Like I want to be like him. But you know, the more I think about it, I'm like, that is such an exception, not the rule. Right? Like the kid has been coding since he was like could walk, and he built 4 products that nobody has ever heard of: ZuckNet, Synapse, like FaceMash, like all these things before he ever started Facebook. And he was doing it as a side project, not to start a company. And they just started taking off, and it got to 1 million users in 10 months. People want to pursue his path, but they don't realize that was his conditions, right? He didn't try to do it. It just happened. He had no choice. He was pulled by the startup. And I think the best reason to start a company is not for like money or prestige. It's because you can't not do it, right? Like life is asking you to do it. And he had to sacrifice so much. Like Zuckerberg is never gonna get to travel and backpack as a kid in college in Thailand. Never. You'll never have that experience. And there's so much about college where it's such a beautiful time to know thyself, to like explore, to find your ikigai, like the thing that you can make money on, that you're good at, that you love doing, and that the world needs, right? And when you give all of that up to pursue a startup, it's a huge sacrifice. Speaking as somebody who made that sacrifice, and like, I think it's just hard to know what you love at that young age, And I think, what was the question?
Yeah, like I guess like well you had it. I mean, obviously you had it. Like, how did you grow up? Like, how did you learn and execute? Like, going from like hustling to like now you're managing people and managing people who manage people. Like, how did you bridge that gap, or if you ever did?
How shit of a job I did. So it's honestly, I think it might have been a really bad setup for me in particular because it was a college startup, and all our initial employees were friends in college, which sounds common, but when you look at the stats, it's not that common for companies to start that way. And I think the main problem is we were a logistics-heavy business in a very seasonal market with very inexperienced labor force. So you have all of these difficulty stacks on top of each other. It's already hard to build a retail business. Now make it delivery. Now make it college run. Now make it seasonal. Now make it's like, and I think we were trying to solve all of those problems while dealing with our emotional immaturity, right? So it's like we're trying to figure ourselves out as people while trying to solve this like insanely complex problem. And honestly, like we did our best and we designed a lot of things and tried a lot of things. But when we started hiring people outside of our friends, things actually got a lot worse. So the first lesson I learned was prioritize aptitude over experience, intrinsics over extrinsics. So I was like, oh, let me hire these like Harvard MBAs that have worked at Uber and DoorDash and all of that. And turns out those people don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to run a business because they've never run a business. They've just gone to school and like checked every box in their life and like are just external signalers. They love signaling. They're really good at that, but they're really bad at doing things. And they thrive in corporate environments where that you can get away with that. But they really suck in environments where you actually have to do the work and solve problems. When it's not about the politics, when it's not about positioning and signaling, where it's about like, can you deliver or not? So few critical hires I made few bad critical hires because of that, relying on resumes and extrinsics. And I think another thing is that money is a curse. So it's a huge double-edged sword. We raised 12 million in July of 2021. So when you give a 22-year-old like that much money, like I remember the wire just hit my bank account. And it's like, it's a lot of zeros. It's also not that much, right? And it was like weird. And you're signing these offer letters for like 300K, and you've never even seen an offer letter in your life. Like I've never had a job, right? Other than the hot dog one. But it was just like, you don't even know what's a good decision, bad decision. You have no reference point. I had zero reference point. I'm like, is this too much? Is too little? I was getting advice from people like, oh yeah, yeah, like 250, 300K, like that's fine. I was like, no, it's not. That's so much money. Yeah, and I think like create a culture of not frugality, and that has like a lot of second order long-term consequences, right? So like we signed leases that were way too expensive for what the business should have been signing, and we hired people that were not needed. There was one time we had a legal team of 5 people, and like a paralegal and 4 interns. Like what? There's not that much legal work, but that all comes as a result of too much capital. You're put in a position where you're like, okay, I have to spend it, and how do I spend that? And then you make these huge high-level decisions that have compounding effects. So like I never understood this saying that a bad hire will cost 10 times their base salary, right? Like how's that possible? But now I know why. It's because of their decisions, because they will hire 10 people, they will sign 10 leases, they will go down this product path that makes you have to restructure, refactor everything that takes another 12 months, and those engineers cost 10x their base salary. It's that they become an extension of your brain. They get to sign contracts when you're not there. So when you make a bad hire, you could be making 1,000 bad decisions in that moment. So hiring was the biggest lesson I learned in 22. The importance of really slow, methodical hiring. And if you never hired executives before, definitely don't do it alone. And like talk to everyone you can, take way longer than you think you should, and fire them as soon as you have a shred of a doubt. Whenever there's doubt, there is no doubt. I've never had a single time where I've doubted someone and they've come back and recovered. Never.
So I guess like I wanted to ask one more question and I'll leave it to the audience. Like, do you have, so at this point, like, you know, lots of crazy stuff happened at this point. What are like, I guess like distill everything down to like 3 things people should think about, right? I don't think people can like retain onto like every single piece of knowledge. 3 things you want people to take away. What would that be? Yeah. And then I'll leave it to the audience to ask some questions.
That's a great way to frame it.
Yeah.
I would say, number 1, don't get pregnant unless you're ready. Number 2, be very careful who you marry. And number 3, it's all about focus. And I can talk more about the third one, but
yeah. I think it's good. It's like people can take that, like, I like that source of advice because then like people think about it and it applies differently to each person. Yeah, it's like very abstract. It's like good. Okay, anybody have any interesting questions based on this journey? Yes?
Just to clarify, you meant like don't get pregnant, like if you can't like start a startup, or do you literally just mean like a kid?
Startup.
The other advice probably also applies.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's two double meaning.
Most people would say, oh yeah, don't have a kid in college, right? That's like commonly accepted. But then you're starting like entrepreneurship programs left and right. Like it's very much the same thing. Like especially once you take venture funding, right? Like once you have $10 million on your cap table, these are people that you're really responsible for. And once you hire employees, they have kids, they have rent, you're responsible for them. And you have to, no matter how you're feeling, whether you want to keep going, whether you want to quit, whether you think it's a good idea, whether you think it's a bad idea, you have to keep going. It's just like having a kid. And so most people take the idea of starting a company too lightly. And they don't understand the implicit opportunity cost of, hold on, I'm in college, I'm never going to be in college again. There's a lot of fun. How about I just enjoy it?
So if you could do it again, would you start a company?
I would have started what I call a disposable business. So a disposable business is a low commitment business. Not disposable in the sense that you just give up after a few months. That's called shiny object syndrome, which is even worse. Disposable in the sense that it's like you're not having a kid that you have to raise. Like you can get out if you need to. You have an exit plan.
Fostering.
right? And so like, some examples might be like starting a tutoring business or starting an online digital business, helping local businesses with social media marketing, like things that will force you to be an entrepreneur and help you learn long-term valuable skills, but you don't have venture funding, you don't have employees, you don't have a lot of responsibility that makes it so you can't get out. That's what I would have started, because I was an international student. It's one of the only ways to stay in the country is either to get a job or start a company, right? Like you can start a company, you can't get a job sometimes. So that's the only other reason. If I was a citizen, I wouldn't have started a company at all.
No. Yep.
There are days that you're going to come across where you have a sense of imposter syndrome and a lot of pressure where should I have done this, should I have not, and how do you overcome something like that as clearly as you've done?
I don't think you do. I think every single founder has those moments, and overcome in the sense of like not acting on it. I think that just takes emotional regulation, self-control. For me, it's like meditation and exercise are mandatory. Otherwise, I kind of lose my mind. Co-founders are a great check and balance to your power. But yeah, I think you feel that no matter who you are. I'm sure like the best entrepreneurs in the world feel that too. Like, I'm sure when Elon lays off like the entire team and he goes, oh, whoops, come back, like he's not like, that was perfect. Like everybody's messing up. And if people are messing up at that level, chances are like we're gonna mess up too. And like, it's just about accepting and like loving yourself regardless. I say that, but it's honestly very hard for me sometimes, like not being too hard on myself. But yeah, you will definitely have moments of self-doubt, and you have to outwork your self-doubt. You have to be like, I literally put 10 hours. Like if I'm not good enough, so be it, you know? But you have to put in the effort and the volume.
Sweet. Do two and maybe like two more after that. Yeah, we'll do Kanu first, yeah.
So one great insight I got from your talk was looking at people more holistically, their aptitudes, and not how stacked their resume or background is. So when you meet like potential employees to let into your family with your startup, what qualities do you think you look for, or you think are the best that we should consider?
I actually have like over the years I've started to collect principles, and one of the most important principles are like the hiring principles, right? And I collect them from everywhere. So like Amazon, Tesla, all this stuff. And like, I think it's three broad buckets. It's, are they exceptional? Do they raise the quality of the people around them? And then prioritize aptitude over experience. So like, are they exceptional? Some sub-questions can be, would you work for them if the roles were reversed? It's such a high bar, to be honest. Like, I never really took that one seriously, but that was Zuckerberg's. He would only hire people he would work for. I think another one is, do they raise the quality of the people around them? And some sub-questions is like, would you hire the 50 people they hire? Like, and then this idea of aptitude over experience I already talked about, but like, you have to hire for slope instead of y-intercept. This is from Sequoia. So like, y-axis, there are people who start at the top, people who start at the bottom, but then, you know, if you have two people, one's like this, like you should hire this one, even if they're worst right now. And you have to invest in them as though they'll always be with you, even if they're gonna leave. Because, yeah, I think like, people are just learning machines. And if you find learners, then your whole company becomes a learning machine. And learning machine companies always beat non-learning companies.
Do one more here and then one more, or Shreya and then Sandra, and then we'll close it up, yeah.
I wondered if you could like maybe go into like what you meant by like focus. So like you mentioned that like during like YC, like there's like so many different pivots. Like how did you know what to focus on or what you wanted to focus on?
Yeah. Focus has honestly become like the biggest passion of mine since 2023. At the end of 2022, we were burning like $500,000 a month, maybe like $700K a month. And obviously I was like, this is bad. And I went off to a cabin in like Big Bear by myself, and I just sat there for a week just reflecting. And I came to the conclusion that the answer was not to do more, it was to do less. Right? And I think back to the moment where we let go of all our co-founders and it was just me and Brian, and how the company just went like that. That wasn't because we had more manpower, more ideas, more hours in the day. It was in fact we had less people, less ideas, less hours in the day. It's about focus. And focus is the most underrated thing in the world because everyone has the same amount of time, same amount of energy, assuming you're sleeping well, exercising well, whatever. Let's say your energy is capped at 10 out of 10. There's diminishing returns. You can only be 10 out of 10 in energy. But you can be 1,000 out of 1,000 in terms of focus if you work on the right thing. It's like a magnifying glass. It's a multiplier. And most people just like, it's like a flashlight. It's not a laser, right? And you want to really have a laser-like focus on the things that you have to do that will move the needle instead of the things that are pressing for your time. There's something called the Eisenhower matrix. Like urgent, not urgent, important, not important. You have to focus on things that are important. Ideally, you get the chance to work on things that are important and not urgent, right? That should be where you put your attention on. Like, what's gonna help me 3 months from now, 3 years from now, 30 years from now? Like, those things are very small. It's like the 4% rule, right? Like, everyone's heard of the Pareto distribution. 20% of the inputs cause 80% of the outputs. Well, 20% of the 20% is 4%. That causes 64% of your outputs. So the 4% is really what you should do. And the magical reality is that you can actually work 1/10 the amount of time. Like I used to be so busy working like 16-hour weeks. Now I can work like an hour a day and get more done than a 16-hour day if I just do the right thing. And I, as a fun exercise, I'll go back to my calendar because I record everything in my calendar, like every single thing. And I look at all the meetings and I'm like, wow, that was an 80-hour week. There was this 1 hour that mattered. Every other hour was wasted. I could go like, oh, that project was canceled. That person was fired. That didn't pan out. That was pointless. It was all pointless. And once you see it, it's like, wow, focus is really everything. You know, I put in so much time, so much blood, sweat, and tears, so much effort, and what's the result? Like 1 hour's worth of input generated all the output that mattered in the long run. And yeah, like, you know, focus is saying no, right? And it's so hard to say no when you don't know what you want. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we made was not saying no enough. Like, not saying no to a lot of positions that we shouldn't have hired for. Not saying no to a bunch of ideas that we shouldn't have built in the first place. Like, a startup doesn't starve, it drowns. Like, there's always ideas. Ideas are so cheap. Everybody and their mom has ideas, right? But it's like, how do you focus down on the most important ideas? Like Steve Jobs would do this thing where he'd take everyone at Apple, top 100 employees. He'd have them fight all day to come up with the best ideas on like what they should work on next. He would list the top 10 in order, and then he would slash the bottom 7. And he would go, we can only do 3. Now, that's like an insane level of focus. You know, the best people, their best ideas after fighting all day, and then boom, just the top sliver. And when you can achieve that level of focus, like, anything's possible, I think. And I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I want to spend the next 10 years like really mastering that skill of focus and teaching others.
Perfect. Last question back there, and then close up. Yeah, Sandra.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much. So going back to your first 1,000 customers who loved your product, what kind of marketing like strategies did you use? So first 1,000 customers.
I heard somebody talk about the cold start problem. I think there's something called the law of shitty click-throughs. Every channel becomes bad once it's popular enough. Just how like every career becomes competitive if it's popular enough. Right? It's hard to be a lawyer because everybody wants to be a lawyer or a doctor, so it's super competitive, hard to get into law school, right? Like same thing with ads, same thing with channels. If everybody's trying to have an ambassador program, that's gonna be tough. Everybody's running Facebook ads, it's gonna be tough. The only channel that doesn't degrade is word of mouth. And I think Duffl and most great B2C companies were built on this one channel alone. If you don't have a product that people will tell their friends organically without you prompting them to, you have nothing. Especially if you're B2C. Right? Like you have to build something people want. And when people want something, it should not be an uphill battle to market it. It is as simple as telling your personal closest friends. And if they tell if you tell 10 closest friends, they tell 10 closest friends, that's 100 customers. Those people tell 10 closest friends, that's 1,000 customers. Right? You're only 3 degrees away from your first 1,000 customers. But there's one thing, it's like a virus, right? The contact rate is one thing, but the contagiousness is another thing. You have to make something that's super contagious, that once you touch it, like somebody has it, like COVID. You have to make something like COVID, right? Just super contagious, and that's how it spreads. If it's not a great product, then marketing, yeah, I mean, you do sales because you suck at marketing, you do marketing because you suck at product.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thanks, David, for your time. Everyone give David a round of applause. That was good.